Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Jaleesa Reed. Dr. Reed is an assistant research professor in the Department of Fiber Science and Apparel Design. Her primary research interest is in millennial Black women's beauty culture and beauty retail spaces. Her interdisciplinary research focuses on connecting human geography, feminist studies, and merchandising in the fashion, apparel, and textiles industry. So, without further ado, Dr. Jaleesa Reed.
Thank you, Juan, for that great introduction. And thank you to the team at the Bronfenbrenner Center for Translational Research for inviting me, also organizing and handling everything. So I just had to show up. So today I'm talking about the Black Beauty Supply Store, which is a type of beauty retailer, a local one, that's a little bit different from the average kinds that you may think of. So if you're not someone who is familiar with shopping at beauty retail stores or with beauty products, I'm going to briefly just kind of show you some of the other spaces you might shop at. Maybe. Okay. So when you think about shopping for beauty products, what comes to mind? This is a rhetorical question, so you don't have to answer it. Just picture something that you would, I guess, the first image that comes to mind. So typically people think of one of these 5 options. Yes, so one of these 5, and they're pictured all in these 4 corners. The first one are department stores. So at department stores, you'll see a beauty counter. It's specific to a brand, and you can kind of walk through and interact with different employees, different people, and different products. The second version are drugstores. So this is like CVS and Walgreens, and you can find brands that you typically will see advertised everywhere, like Maybelline, CoverGirl, and Revlon. This image is a 2-in-1. So it's a big box or mass merchandiser retailer, which is Target or Kohl's or Walmart. And then the Ulta Beauty is an example of a beauty retailer. Another example would be Sephora or Sally Beauty Supply. And these are stores that sell only beauty products. And then the last example is an indie beauty brand, which is on the rise thanks to millennials and Generation Z. And these brands typically focus on having an experiential setup. So when people come to them, they're looking for an experience. The brands typically start online. And so the physical space is an opportunity to bring the brand to life. So in the context of this study, I interviewed millennial Black women, and they found that they were not having the same sort of experience that people tend to have at these stores. So Nicole, one of the participants in the study, says, "There's stuff in Sephora and MAC, and I know this is not for me. I can't use it. I have this spot in the corner that is for me." It's not the same as a white woman that when you're walking into the store, you feel like, oh my gosh, I have the pick of everything. And she kind of draws attention to the fact that she knows she can shop in these other stores, but she also recognizes that they're not really created with her in mind. So she'll go to either one aisle where there might be a section for her or a corner in a larger store. So throughout this presentation, you'll see some quotes from the different participants in the study, and you'll get to know them a little bit. But before that, I kind of want to set up the context of the study so you understand where I'm going and how I started. So this was a qualitative interview study. I interviewed 20 self-identified millennial Black women in the US, and millennials are born between 1981 and 1996. These were semi-structured interviews, meaning that I had an interview protocol. There were specific themes that I wanted to hit on during the interview, and all of them took place in February and March last year. For this study, this was in the recruitment survey. So this is how I defined Black or Black American by Catherine McKittrick and Clyde Woods. And participants just had to say, yes, I agree with this definition, I fall within it. And that was the process of them self-identifying. Here you can see where the participants came from. Most of them were located in the Southeast and in the Northeast, and there was one person that was in California. 7 out of the 20 were in Georgia, and then the second most popular place was Washington, DC. So a lot of the impressions that I'll talk about later are from these 2 main regions. So my study was framed using 2 theoretical frameworks. The first one was Black feminist thought, and the second one is Black feminist geographies. So Black feminist thought relates to the representation of Black women in media and also at these stores. And the term was coined by Patricia Hill Collins in 1990 when she publishes the first volume of this book. Black feminist thought is a critical social theory. It's committed to justice for US Black women collectively and other oppressed groups. But there are three tenets of Black feminist thought that relate to this study today. So the first one is controlling images. So Hill Collins says that there are 5 main stereotypes that Black women tend to be organized into when we look at media and representation. They are the mammy, the Jezebel, the matriarch, the mule, and the welfare queen. So all of these representations sort of function as controlling images or stereotypes. So they can't really move in and out of them. And in the process of that, she offers the chance to self-define themselves. So once you realize that these images exist and you have to sort of recognize that they don't actually include you or how you see yourself, and then as a result, you choose to define yourself the way that you want to be seen by others. And then lastly, she talks about the everyday, which is, shopping for beauty products is sort of an everyday type of thing. And that's the context of where people are sort of shopping for these products. And this video that's been playing on the side is just the outside of a typical beauty supply store. And you'll see these representations of Black women and all the different products that they sell. They're typically floor to ceiling. And beauty supply stores are not really advertised. So if you don't know them or know where they are, you'd have to look for these images to kind of give you a clue that this is the store that you're looking for. The second theory that I used was Black feminist geography, which relates to looking at the beauty supply store as a space and a place. So standing from, looking from where you are at the image, looking at the beauty supply store as a building is looking at it as a space. So it's in a location, it's a building, we see the outside of it. But once we go inside and we start to look at what people are doing, what does this experience mean to them, then it becomes a place. So it brings meaning to it. This theory is also a critical social theory, but it was coined by Catherine McKittrick, and it comes out of human geography and Black studies. And she says that the spaces that Black people occupy are the terrain of struggle itself. So in this sense, even if Black people are not in the same space, because they were there, you can see sort of evidence that they were and that there was struggle there. So she uses the auction block as an example. And then she goes on to say that Black women give space meaning, which is what's happening at the beauty supply store. So through their presence there and the fact that these products are tailored towards them, they, one, visit the place, but then the actions that happen make it meaningful. So what is a Black beauty supply store exactly? I define it as a store for beauty products ranging from hair, lashes, makeup, clothes, and jewelry. Products in the store are tailored to Black or brown women. Stores are usually located in predominantly Black neighborhoods and can be large like malls or playgrounds. And most take a minimalist approach to merchandising. So this definition came from out of the interview data. The main question that I used was, how would you describe a beauty supply store to an outsider? So someone that has never been to the store before and they have no sort of frame of reference. And the things that I highlighted in blue are the main themes that came out of that. So they mentioned that there were different varieties of products available in one store. All of these products are tailored to Black or brown women. These stores are usually located in predominantly Black neighborhoods, and they have a minimalist approach to merchandising, which just means that there's not much happening in terms of how they organize the store or how things are decorated. So here's an example of Chapel Beauty, the outside of it. And you can see that there are these images in the front. So those ads are still there, sort of signaling to people that this is a beauty supply store. And this is an example of a pretty large one. It used to be a Sears, it's a part of a mall, and they refurbished it, and now it's a beauty supply store. So if you think about how large a Sears is on the inside and the different departments, the same is happening here at Chapel Beauty. There's sections for wigs, sections for cosmetics, and also for just beauty products. So just to cover what we know about beauty supply stores before I go into my own results. So firstly, they were studied by Robert Silverman in 1998 and 1999. And at that time, he referred to them as ethnic beauty aids. And he studied them from the perspective of minority entrepreneurship and immigrant entrepreneurship. Boyd, Ryu, Yi, and Hostin also look at the beauty supply store, but it's more peripheral. So they're actually investigating the area that the store is in, looking at different types of stores that are in that specific area, and finding out how much racial profiling is actually taking place. Beauty supply stores that service Black women in the US are typically owned by Jewish or Korean immigrants, and this stems from the history of the beauty supply store, which started off as a store for wigs. So these were the two populations that really had a hold on that, and then they sort of evolved into what we know them as today. Black American beauty and Black beauty spaces are also political. So the studies that I've cited here look at hair salons as sites where there's activism taking place, where Black women are able to have conversations that they wouldn't normally have in a public place. So for example, they can talk about personal relationships, community engagement. They can use the space to sort of bring people in and encourage them to do some activism within their local community. This image on the right is from a Black-owned beauty supply store called Kova Beauty. And I'm showing it to you now because I want you to sort of hold it in your head as what a display can look like. And then I'll go through some other images and come back to this at the end. So the beauty supply store is also a retail environment, and retail environments are designed to sell. That's the main purpose of them. And there have been many studies that look at the things that can influence a consumer to buy something. So that can be anything from smells, music, lighting, color, the layout of the store, and the design. And also, more importantly for this study, location and demographics also influence the store elements. So hours of operation and merchandise can change depending on where the store is located. For example, if you put your store in a place that you think might be unsafe at night or when it gets dark, then you might leave it open from 9 to 5, and at 5 you leave and go back home. Same with the merchandise, depending on who is in the area. Of course, you want to target those people and provide what they need. And then lastly, there is the instances of racial profiling or bias that exist in retail stores in general. So this study is sponsored by Sephora. It was conducted in 2020 and then published in 2021. And they look at experiences of BIPOCs across different retail stores. So this is across the retail industry, not specific to beauty. And it was a mixed method study, quantitative and qualitative. The quantitative portion was a survey that around 4,700 people participated in. So it's a pretty wide range. And they found these 5 themes that resulted from that. So the first one is that limited racial diversity in marketing and advertising gives people the notion that they will be excluded before they get to the store. So if you see an ad and you recognize that you're not in that ad, then you might think the store isn't really for me. The second thing is that shoppers and retail employees have different perceptions of what is actually happening in the store. So if there's a conflict or an altercation, shoppers tend to think that it's something that's happening as a result of assumptions about their skin color, the way they look, the way they dress, or an attitude that they have towards the employee. But employees think that they're just responding to the way that the consumer is acting. So when you ask both what's happening, there are different perceptions. For the shoppers, because of what they expect to happen or have experienced, they tend to develop coping mechanisms to sort of minimize the impact on themselves. These coping mechanisms can be anything from doing research beforehand so that you know what you want, you don't have to interact with anyone, and you can just quickly get in or get out. And then number 4, most shoppers don't actually report what's happening. So people tend to think that it's just an individual thing. It just happened to me. It's not happening to anyone else. And because they don't report it, then retailers don't really see the patterns in what's happening. So they're not able to really take action against it, at least in the words of Sephora. And then lastly, because of these sort of impressions of what's happening, employees and shoppers feel that meaningful and long-term action is needed on behalf of the retailer to kind of tell them, that they're taking this seriously and that it won't happen again if they return back to the store. So these same things are also happening at the beauty supply store, even though this is not specific to beauty. And I'm going to talk about how it's happening gradually. So what makes the beauty supply store different from all of the other beauty retailers that exist? So for one, all of these things on the outside, the four things are all interacting together and meeting and intersecting at the store, which creates an intense experience for millennial Black women who talked about what's happening at the store in this study. So I'm going to slowly go through these different options or different parts from Black American beauty culture around through location, ownership, and then back to the beauty supply store as a whole. So one of the first questions that I asked participants was about beauty. How do you define beauty in general? How do you define American beauty? And then how do you define Black beauty? So American beauty and beauty kind of resulted in the same sort of definitions. People talked about a Eurocentric standard, one that is basically saying that women should look thinner, they should have straighter hair, lighter skin. And then when they talked about a Black beauty standard, it was noticeably different in the sense that there was an internal one and an external one. So internally, they talked about sort of your inside coming to your outside. So the aura that you have, the way that you carry yourself, and then externally, you would want to measure up to those Eurocentric beauty standards. So Diamond pretty much captures what all of the participants were saying about Black American beauty. And she says that, I think Black beauty would start with confidence. And I think that's why I relate to beauty inside and out, because, a lot of the pictures in the world do not define Black women as beautiful. So I feel like as a Black woman, I have to remind myself a lot of little things that make me beautiful, that society either frowns upon or is just now getting on the wave. So my hair, the way I walk, my skin complexion, my shape is Black beauty, as in having to and wanting to appreciate everything, not just this one ideal package. So she points out a couple of important things that relate back to Black feminist thought. So she says that she recognizes that there are images out there, these controlling images that she does not fit into. And because of that, she chooses to define herself in relation to that on her own terms at the beauty supply store. And then she goes on to say that she knows that she has to, and she wants to also appreciate all of these things about herself. So for most of the women in the study, the beauty supply store was culturally and historically important to them. It was a place where they sort of grew up and where they entered from an early age. So Sunshine, this is her childhood store. And when I asked her, do you remember the first time you went to the beauty supply store and what that experience was like? She referenced her store by location. She said, yes, I remember it was on the corner of Gratiot and Outer Drive. And I looked it up afterwards and it's still there, it still exists. And even though it's an older store, you can see that there's still sort of these images on the front that clue you in that this is a beauty supply store, but also there are older advertisements on the outside. So you can see how they've kind of developed over time into targeting their main market. So in the beauty supply store, for the women that went there, starting usually in middle school or younger, they would go with a maternal figure. So their mother, their aunt, eventually an older sister, and then a friend as they got older. So you can see on the left, this is just kind of an example of one aisle in the store and all of the different hair beads, barrettes, baubles, and so forth that girls could use to kind of choose from and decorate their own or decorate themselves and separate themselves from others. So Morgan talks about this and she reflects back and she says, I was a child of my time, so I had like 30 different rainbow beads in my hair. And my mother wonders why I grew up queer. Like, you threw rainbows on me my entire life. And I remember being really, really excited to go to the hair store because when my mom would put beads in my hair, she used to let me pick the color beads. So I remember being super stoked about that when I was a kid. And this was a big moment for Morgan because as she kind of grew into herself later on, she remembers feeling validated by her mom for letting her choose from these options and to choose the one that she felt she would identify with most. So this is an early step in her defining herself and starting to take ownership of the appearance that she presents to everyone else. At the beauty supply store, you can also find other products. And if you go to the right store, you'll be able to create an entire outfit and fashion your image. So here there's a picture from the jewelry section. There's also clothes and then shoes. So you can see just from looking at this, the type of merchandising that's taking place. There's not really much effort put into it. Here on the shoes, you can see that they're in boxes. Some of them are out, some of them are in, but you really have to kind of look through this and do some exploring on your own. But what you find at the store is pretty much dependent on location. So even though they tend to be located in predominantly Black neighborhoods, that doesn't mean that every store is going to have the same thing. And so Cora talks about this and she says that she would do her own kinky twists, which is a style, where people added hair and there was a certain kind of hair, a certain brand that she would have to get. And even though the package would look similar, she'd be able to know how the hair performed just by looking at it. And so to find this hair, she would go specifically to a store on the south side of Chicago, maybe the west side, but she knew that she had to go to the south side to get to a store that would have this specific hair. So she shows that she's pretty knowledgeable about the products at the store. She can tell which one she needs, what color and what texture would work for her just from the outside. But she also knows that she has to go to a certain section of her city to get what she needs. So up until this point, I've pretty much talked about the beauty supply store in terms of its cultural relevance, how it relates to Black American beauty, but I haven't really talked about what is happening in the stores from the perspective of millennial Black women. So because the stores are typically associated with violence, there are two narratives that exist. If you look on the left side, this is, if you just typed in beauty supply store on Google, you might find more of these, well, you will, not might, find more of these options. And this is just the narrative that's dominant in media. And it pretty much says that beauty supply stores are spaces where Black women are violent, where they're attacking the store owners. And there's no real kind of comparison there. It's just a pretty much, this is how it is. And then on the right, if you dig a little deeper, you'll find stories like this, where the Asian-owned beauty supply store faces a boycott, or a civil rights group wants an apology after the video shows that the store owner admitted to kicking a customer. So these types of stories on the right circulate within the Black community, and people, instead of, well, they can't really report it to anyone because they're local stores. So instead, to resist, they tell their friends and family and tell them not to shop there. And if they can, they'll go to a different store that's sort of in the same area. But if they can't, then eventually they will end up going back to the store that they're trying to avoid, just because it's convenient and because of its location. So to kind of understand what's happening at the store from their perspective, I will take you through from the outside going in. But before that, I'm going to share a quote from one of the participants who talks about what really stands out to her in terms of why this is happening. And so for Sunshine, she says that it's the ownership. So she says, for me, it's a very uncomfortable experience, mostly because it feels like this is the only place that I can go. And because it's so normalized, I just suppress it and I put it in the back of my head. So I'm going in to get what I need to get. But when you sit with it, it's not normal, or it shouldn't be normal, that they are able to make us feel so out of place in that space. And Sunshine, like I said, she's been shopping at the beauty supply store for most of her life. And she mentioned that when she was younger, she didn't really think that there was an issue with it. So it became sort of an internalized experience for her. But then at the time that I interviewed her, she was a PhD student. So she said that now that she has access to an education and she knows what's happening, she can clearly say that, she's unhappy with the surveillance taking place in the store. She feels that, people are watching her all the time and she's uncomfortable with that experience. So on the right, you can sort of see these cameras. I circled them in red, and then I'm going to keep showing them to you throughout so that you can kind of get an idea of what the experience is. So this is starting from the outside. This is Smart Beauty Supply in Decatur, Georgia. And you can see it right here, these same sort of bars on the windows. And this is just a close-up in terms of the video. So you can see what it's like when you really get up on it. And participants talked about, in the same way that if you would look at the advertisements for another store and you don't see yourself represented, in that same sense, you would go to the store and you see the bars. And so you sort of think, well, are you wanting me not to come in here? Or are you associating this location as a place where people would come in and steal something? Or are you worried about theft, et cetera? And so they talked about having to sort of brace themselves for whatever might happen once they were in the store. And then once they're in the store, they had this feeling of being watched. So on the right, you can see I'm standing in one aisle and there are 6 cameras that you can see from this one section. And some of them are the cameras that hang down and then others are the ones that stick to the ceiling. So from this one area, there's a lot of different ways that the cameras are facing. And then on the TV screens, you can actually look at yourself while you see the cameras watching you. So it's sort of this double surveillance thing happening at the same time. And then on this image, you can also see the cameras. Here, there are 2 TV screens, but this is the front, the cash wrap area. So all of these screens tend to face the cashiers, so they can also look out at the store, but also look up close and see you in the screens. So this related to one being watched and then finally feeling that there was a powerful presence in the store from the owners and also from the employees. So these cash wrap areas, cash wrap is just the front of the store where you would check out at. They tend to be on a platform. So they're raised maybe about 1 to 2 feet, depending on the store that you're shopping at. And so when the employee walks up and gets behind there and they come around to here, they're automatically looking down at you, not on purpose, hopefully, but mostly because the platform is there and they don't really have, any leeway. So the person standing on the other side, you can see that her chest comes up to the top, and there's kind of this power dynamic. Cooper, one of the participants, referred to this as a hierarchy, and she said, after I've walked through the store, I've been followed around. No one asked me if I needed any help. And then I get to the end and I have to check out. And now I have to deal with this person looking down at me on the way out the door. So this just sort of emphasized to her that there was an experience taking place that wasn't one that she would find at a regular, or not a regular, but an average beauty retailer. And then the last thing that participants pointed out was having this feeling of a different sort of environment and experiencing different treatment. So they referenced these boxes that were on the floor. So they're open. You kind of have to dig through them and figure out what's in there. The same is happening on the right with these boxes here, and they're also in the aisle. So the aisle is considerably small already, and then it's smaller with the boxes. And then these belts here are also sort of disheveled and disorganized. So participants said that this felt like a lack of care, a lack of warmth from the people that own the store, but also just going in and trying to navigate this and having people not be able to, one, direct you around and also not help you find the things that you need. So they talked a lot about trying to talk to owners or employees about specific products or hair types that they were looking for. And they would just say, well, I don't know, you can look around. Or they wouldn't have much to offer them in terms of recommendations. So it's really a store where you go in, kind of have to know what you want and figure it out yourself while you're in there. So in the eyes of millennial Black women who were shopping at this store from an early age and then continuing on, this experience is amplified. So it feels more intense every time that they go to the beauty supply store. And after they've kind of internalized it, they get used to it. And then through the interview, they actually looked back and said, well, I'm not really comfortable with what's happening, but I never thought about it until now when you asked me, because I've been going there for so long. And so I've showed you pictures from Georgia for the most part, but these pictures are from New York. So here, this is in Syracuse. You can see that there are still these open containers on the ground, and you're expected to kind of go through those. And this was the same in this store in every aisle. So every aisle looked like this. In this image is a second store in Syracuse, and I didn't talk as much about the signs, but the signs really sort of prescribe the type of behavior they expect you to have in the beauty supply store. So this one says, please do not remove the wig from the mannequin head and walk around with it. So just simply, this is what I want you to do. Don't do this on top of everything else that's already happening. And then this store is also in New York, but you can see that there are the boxes at the bottom, same concept from the last store, where people are going to have to dig through and sort of look for what they need. So what is happening at the beauty supply store? Well, it's complicated. It really depends on where you're standing. So for people that are owning these businesses, they tend to be a way to kind of get into, to kind of achieve the American dream. So it's a way to support your family, to build up your capital, send your kids to school, to college. That's typically the narrative that you hear from owners and entrepreneurs. From the perspective of Black women, it's not necessarily a great space, not one that they want to go to, because it's not a positive experience for them, but they have to go to it because it has the products or the tools that they need to manage the internal beauty standard that they have within their community. So there's not really a chance for them to opt out of going to the beauty supply store unless they opt out of managing their own appearance and decide that they want to look a way that doesn't need any other kind of products or tools to help them. So if we zoom out for a minute and look at this from a global perspective, we can see how the people that are that the hair is coming from and the people that are wearing the hair on the other end are connected all through the supply chain. So this article by Petrolis looks at the role of hair in boosting the South Korean economy. And they state that the wig started as hair on the head of a Korean villager, and then it transformed into raw material in the hands of a Seoul factory worker. Then it became a product on the shelves of a Korean American store owner, and finally was on the wig on the head of an African American woman. So as the hair is sort of moving through the supply chain, it has a different role and a different level of importance for all of these people that are touching it and interacting with it. So it's not just what's happening at the beauty supply store in the local sense, but also how the products connect back to where they're from or how they're coming down through the chain. So just to recap, this was a qualitative interview study. I interviewed 20 self-identified millennial Black women. Black feminist thought and Black feminist geography were the theoretical frameworks I used to frame the study. And these were all semi-structured interviews that occurred last year. So now that we know all of this information about Black beauty supply stores, what do we do with it? So there are some insights that we have into retail stores. So first, the Black beauty supply store is a site for transferring Black beauty knowledge, and that's practically and symbolically. So there are practical things that are taught in the store, such as you need to use this tool or this product if you want to achieve this style. And there are also symbolic things like, if you go to the store, you can manage your own appearance, you can play around with these different types of hair colors and different hair textures. And that helps you in the long run sort of fashion the identity that you're trying to achieve. We can also gain some insight into the relationship between two racial and ethnic groups that are interacting and intersecting in the store. And then lastly, when you look at it from the perspective of the owners and then also from the consumers, there's different ideas of what's happening in the store and also the way the environment is working to amplify that or decrease that. So on the entrepreneur or the ownership side, this is just the way the store is set up. They might have bought the store from someone else, so they're carrying over that design, and then there's no real intention behind it, they say. And then for consumers, this is only making the experience worse. So it's sort of helping people keep track of where they are in the store or encouraging them to kind of get in and get out. So some solutions to this, these solutions came from the participants, and they talked about community engagement, profit sharing, store design, and then shopping with Black-owned businesses. So in terms of the community, they were looking for more engagement from the store owners to really interact with them, but interact with the community and also have a real presence in the community. So not just coming in, taking the money and then going back out, but coming in, staying, and at times sharing some of those profits with the community. And that could be in the form of scholarships for kids that were going to college, working with local nonprofits, donating to events, or participating in community events were some of the examples that people talked about. They also talked about changing the store design, so changing the way the products were placed, increasing the lighting or making it brighter, and then changing where the cameras were or the types of cameras that were used. So they felt that there was an overwhelming amount of cameras, so it's hard to sort of escape that experience or that feeling that you're being watched. And a lot of them talked about understanding the need for loss prevention or why you would have cameras in the first place, but do they really need to have that many in that store? And then lastly, they talked about the possibility of shopping with Black-owned businesses. So for the most part, they didn't, or they hadn't had any experiences with Black-owned beauty supply stores. Most of that was because they either couldn't find them, or if they could find them, they were out of the way. So 30 to 45 minutes of a drive from their home. And once they got there, they usually didn't have the products that they needed. So all of these kind of pushed them to shopping with the Asian-owned beauty supply stores where they really didn't want to shop with in the first place, but they had limited options in comparison to that. And so Michelle, she talks about the experience of going to a Black-owned beauty supply store and how that was different for her. And she says, it felt like home and understanding. And then also, you feel proud when you walk into a Black-owned beauty supply store because I'm giving these people, non-Black store owners, my money for so long, and now I get to give it to someone who looks like me. And so this was a way for Michelle to feel empowered by shopping with people that she said looked like her, but also because she was shopping for products that were geared towards her and in a space that was also, made her feel welcome. So Black-owned beauty supply stores would play different music. They had more colors on the inside. There was definitely more of an approach to designing and merchandising to make people feel like they should linger in the store versus just coming and going. And so I'm gonna take you back to Kova Beauty Supply, which I showed you that image of, and I asked you to kind of keep it in the back of your mind. And this is Kova Beauty in Stockbridge, Georgia. It's a Black-owned beauty supply store opened by a millennial Black woman she wasn't in the study, but this is her store. And I went to the store and I asked her, why did you open the store and why did you set it up this way? And she said, basically, she got tired of waiting for this experience and she just decided to do it herself. So you can see that she's already sort of made these changes that participants talked about, without needing my data. She kind of knew what to do and how to keep people attracted to the space. So there's better lighting here. This is the cash wrap in the middle, and it's not up on a platform, it's level with the floor. You can see all of the products pretty clearly, and they're really organized. There's none that are missing, and they're not dusty or anything like that. And then in the back, there's one camera, and I circled it in white, and there's only 2 cameras in this store in the back corners. So it's a pretty large store, and yes, there is a need for the cameras, but you wouldn't really notice them unless you're looking for them. And that's kind of the point that participants were trying to get across. So for millennial Black women, it's not necessarily that they continue to put up with this experience, compared to the women before them, they have more access to beauty products and access to beauty retailers. And then they're also taking the initiative to kind of create a new experience for everyone that comes after them or everyone that is with them. So in addition to opening their own beauty supply store, some have opened drive-through beauty supply stores in Georgia, and they also have like mobile ones that are vans, and they have those same sort of representations on the outside to show you that this is a beauty supply store or a beauty supply van. And all of those products are still in there and can be sold to people. So that concludes my talk, and I welcome any questions, comments, or feedback. Thank you. Yes, did I look at online shopping? Yes and no. So some participants talked about, instead of going to the beauty supply store, they would shop online. And there were mostly wholesale websites that they were looking at. But a lot of them didn't feel comfortable shopping online because they felt that they needed to touch the hair or interact with the products first. And so it felt like more of a hassle than just going to the store. Yes.
Yeah, a couple comments and a question. First of all, this is not a talk that I thought I would enjoy, but I have. I find it very interesting. And I'm appalled at the very poor retail examples that you showed us. I mean, those are going out of business plans. Those are not real stores. So the question I have is the conclusions and the content of your study. Have you tried sharing that with some of the owners of those stores? And if you did, what do they say?
So I haven't tried sharing them directly with the owners, but I have talked to some of their children or some of their kids that are more around my age range. And their perspective is that the stores are not really, they're not really taught to kind of think about the consumer in this way. So they are taught to sort of watch people when they walk in and to be cognizant of, they might try to steal something and to be vigilant about that. But they're not taught that, the store design might be influencing that, or that they need to do some extra training to kind of interact with the customers. So for the most part, it seemed like, they're not really interested in making these sort of changes unless it would have an influence on their profit. So they're making pretty good profit right now because people have to shop here. There's not really many other options for them. And in the face of that, why make the changes unless you really care about the consumers?
Are you worried about the store that might open up the store that doesn't like?
Yes, right, which is a concern that the woman that owned this store brought up too.
Dr. Reed, thank you very much for this talk. I, for one, thought I would enjoy it, and I did very much. This was fantastic, very insightful, lots to think about here. A couple of us were kind of ruminating by some of the visuals about how we felt, either from memory or being with folks shopping in these spaces, what it feels like. And so I think it's a testament to your sharing the visuals with this and the stories of your participants about this. A question I had, I think actually picks up right where the previous question and your response to it sort of ended, which is I'm wondering about sort of the quote unquote sort of marketplace dynamics here is you alluded at I'm curious about solutions to this and the experiences and the shop owners could do versus folks shopping in them around. Do you have any data about, or what do you think it might matter to have shops in close proximity to one another about these experiences? Is there some benefit to having competition that would actually up shopkeepers' game a little bit in terms of the experience they're putting on for clients and customers? Is there any evidence to suggest that these experiences are made better by having shops in close proximity that can learn from each other and improve because of competition?
Mm-hmm. So I haven't looked at this specifically, not in terms of research, but I have sort of looked around to see how close beauty supply stores are and what changes about them. So really, when they are close, they tend to have different product varieties and also different prices. So you can go to, for example, I'm looking at some sites in New York, and there's 4 on one street. So on that street, they all sell the same types of combs, same types of products. One store has it for $1.99, the other store has it for $3.29. Same brand, same color, everything. And there's also some zoning laws that kind of prevent them from being close to each other. So it really depends on where they're located. So, and I forgot what city it was, but I've seen evidence that in a plaza, you can't have more than one store that is targeting beauty in some way. So a barber, a hair salon, and a beauty supply store cannot be in the same plaza in this specific city. But in others, you can find them in the same plaza because it makes sense. You know, someone from the hair salon or the barber shop might want to go and buy products while they're working. So there's sort of these two kind of things that I've noticed. So about the products, the variety, the prices, and then zoning laws also have an impact. Yes.
So as you were giving the presentation, which was great, well, why doesn't somebody, you know, develop a Black beauty supply store modeled on Sephora? You know, so I love the fact that you ended with this Kova supply. Now, do you have any sense of, has this been a widely successful model? I mean, how does, you know, sort of the shopping results or, you know, compared to the more traditional Black beauty supplies that you, you know, shared us, you know, pictures of and stories of? I mean, do you have a sense of, is this like really catching on and people are, you know, really going there a lot? Could you comment on that?
Yes, so in the case of this specific store, she did say that she's kind of built up a clientele over the years. And one of the things that she said kind of distinguishes her store from the traditional Black beauty supply store is that her employees resemble the people that are shopping there. So she makes it a point to hire young Black women who are aware of the trends and also can kind of help people pick out the products that they need. So that also helps people sort of linger there, and they're not really trying to get in and get out. And you can, she talked about upselling. So trying to get them to buy more products too while they're there at the same time. In terms of other Black owned beauty supply stores, they tend to buy the stores from people who are going out of business. So they'll take a store that was used to be owned by Asian entrepreneurs and then just take it over, buy their own products and so forth. So there's not much space for them to sort of change the store design. And they try to combat that with, you know, the music, making it feel more warm in the interior and adding colors and employees that can really help.
I know to wait for the mic. I've seen Juan running around. I'm really curious about your focus on millennial women, and I just am interested to hear more about why that's the population that you centered in your interviews, and also if you're expecting there might be generational differences in either direction, like what's Gen Z up to?
Okay, so millennials, like I said, they were born between 1981 and 1996. So the Black women that came before them were not really interested in the same extent with fashioning their hair in all these different types of ways and using all these different types of colors, or even using cosmetics to the same level that millennials do. And some millennials, they did talk about that in the study. Like their moms would say, you're spending too much time working on your hair, you're spending too much time working on your makeup, you know, just get a good outfit together. And it's all about how you present yourself with the outfit on. So they had different concerns and different things that they sort of prioritized when it came to managing their beauty. And so that's what made me focus on millennials, because they have this exposure to their parents or older maternal figures and how they were addressing themselves. And they were, you know, more interested in the trends and wanting to experiment with that on their own. Generation Z, you know, I'm not sure how they look at the beauty supply store. I haven't looked at that, but I do know that they're definitely into indie beauty brands. So I could see them either shopping with an alternative to this, but I also know that Gen Z is not, I don't think they would be likely to put up with these sort of experiences. So millennials are sort of taking that first step away and then providing more options for Gen Z to really choose from in the future, I think.
you look at makeup itself and the new crossover brands, then California there's a lot of crossover brands that
Mhm,
previously unserved.
mhm.
And perhaps that affects something like Coma in terms of wholesale.
So the brands are the cosmetic brands that are typically in beauty supply stores. For the most part, they're targeting a completely different population. You might not find them in the average beauty retailers that I showed in the beginning. And they're brands that people tend to not have heard of. They have usually pretty toxic chemicals. They don't last long. They don't have the sort of benefits that people are usually looking for when they look at cosmetics. So I haven't looked at crossover brands specifically, but I do know that in the store, people tend to only look at or want eyeliner, lip gloss, just basics, not really foundation or anything that they feel won't get too far into their skin.
There's a question from online asked by Alyssa W, and I'll read it for you, which is, thank you, Dr. Reed, for this presentation. I'm from NYC, and as a Black woman that grew up with the beauty supply store ingrained in my shopping experience. In my area, they now have young Black workers, often who just came into the country to help customers navigate the store, but the power dynamic still exists between the Black employees and store owners. In your study, did the participants share any ideas on how to incentivize non-Black beauty supply owners to cost share with our communities?
That's a good question. No, they didn't. They didn't share anything like that. And actually, there was someone who shared a story about someone in her neighborhood who tried to open a Black-owned beauty supply store. And she said that the owner sort of went around and tried to talk to some of the Asian-owned beauty supply stores and try and find out where she should buy products, what kind of vendors she could contact. And she went ahead and purchased the space. So she had the space, she just didn't have the products. And what she found was that other people were not willing to let her in terms of competition. They didn't want her to use the same vendors or the same manufacturers. And so she tried to, rally the community and say, instead of shopping there, shop with me. But she didn't have the right products. So like I was sort of mentioning earlier, the supply chain, who's in control of these products and where they go is really impacting who can own the retail store at the end.
I was wondering, so a store like this, like Kova, is that competing with a more traditional type beauty supply store, or is it competing more with Sephora? And if it is competing with a more traditional style store, is it able to compete price-wise, or are people willing to pay more for a better experience?
So yes, it is competing with a traditional store. I wouldn't say that it's competing as much with Sephora because there are different products here. And the products that Sephora is sort of higher brand labels, prestige brands, and you wouldn't find them at the beauty supply store either. So there's not much product crossover. But in terms of price, the owner mentioned that she tries to price along the same lines as a traditional beauty supply store, but she also tries to offer more variety. So instead of having maybe 3 brands that you can use for natural hair, she has maybe 10. And so she tries to offer that in every product category so that people can kind of find the thing that they want the most. So that's how she sort of keeps the competitive edge.
Hi there. I'm curious if any of your interview participants disclosed perhaps a queer LGBTQ identity and how they find these shopping experiences, and if you have any insight on those identities in these spaces.
It's a good question. 2 women did mention or kind of allude to it, but they didn't talk about how it influenced their experience, and they really didn't bring it up as anything that was, I guess, relevant, except for Morgan, who talked about having the rainbow beads in her hair at a young age. Yeah. So that's really the only example that I have. But that would be a good thing to look at in the future because these are really feminine spaces that sort of target a specific type of beauty or appearance.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo others and say I was excited for this talk and enjoyed it. So thank you so much for sharing. And this may be a bit beyond the scope of this current study, but you mentioned the organizing and political action in Black spaces like salons. And so I'm wondering how that transfers or doesn't to beauty supply stores. So I'm guessing it probably doesn't to Asian-owned stores, given the experience you described, but interested in your thoughts about a space like Kova.
Yeah, I didn't actually ask her about this, but I think that it could be a store or a space where there could be some political activism happening, especially after hours when the store is closed and there's not many consumers there. People can still come in and sort of interact in this space. And there's, you can't see it here, but there's a lot of space in the front that's sort of free. So there would be an area for them to sort of get together.
Thank you.
I had a quick question about, we're just curious if you know if there's national data around the prevalence of Black-owned businesses and, and so that you might be able to look at the, how often are beauty supply stores owned by Black owners and also if there might be change over time, if things are improving or staying the same.
So I haven't found any data that fully captures all of the states in the US, but I have found sort of collections of different Black-owned beauty supply stores that people create locally. So they sort of crowdsource all of the locations in their area, then they post those online and share with other people so that if they want to shop there, they can. But in terms of really concrete data that I can compare, I haven't found that yet.
All right, it is 1 o'clock, so we're gonna end the questions there, but we'd like to thank Dr. Jaleesa Reed for the talk today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.